Introduction to Ethics, Chapter 10, Allowing Someone to Die, Mercy Death, and Mercy Killing. Now, in this chapter, the use of euthanasia is examined. The author uses some unique terminology. We'll discuss his and we'll compare them to the more usual terms. Although there aren't any real standards, hospice has changed the debate somewhat, at least in the United States. In any case, this is a complex and fascinating topic, and it goes right to the heart of the difficult philosophical discussion of the meaning of life and of death. Now, we will need to define some terms. First of all, euthanasia originally meant good death. It didn't originally mean that. It still means good death. More recently, however, we use the term euthanasia when we're talking about mercy killing. The author replaces this term with three separate terms. One, allowing someone to die. Two, mercy death. And three, mercy killing. So let's talk about these things. Allowing someone to die involves both not starting curative treatment when no cure is possible, and then stopping treatment when it's no longer able to cure a dying patient. It means allowing a patient to die a natural death without any interference from medical science. Ethically, virtually no one has an issue with allowing someone to die. This has nothing to do with the great debates that are raging throughout the United States about this. Allowing someone to die is just about universally accepted. Now, some other terms. Mercy death is the taking of direct action in order to terminate a patient's life because the patient has voluntarily requested it. Essentially, we are talking about assisted suicide. Mercy killing is the taking of a direct action to terminate a patient's life without his or her permission. The current legal status of mercy death and mercy killing. Neither mercy death nor mercy killing is legal in the United States or in most countries throughout the world. Now, brain death, we're talking about brain death. It occurs when a patient has a normal heartbeat and respiration, but has suffered irreversible and total brain damage. Medical death, at least in many instances now, is defined as brain death. 32 states specifically prohibit mercy death, which is assisted suicide, and it is generally illegal under homicide statutes. Now, just a moment ago, we said that it wasn't legal in the United States, but that's not necessarily true. There are some jurisdictions that allow it under very specific and stringent circumstances. The AMA and the feds, however, ever since, for instance, it passed in Oregon, have been working to try to get that reversed. They say, well, it's not legal federally, so how can it be legal within a separate jurisdiction? Persistent vegetative state, a PVS, results from damage to the cerebral cortex, which controls cognitive functions. This is distinct from brain death. PVS results from, again, cerebral cortex, neocortex, or front brain death. We'll talk more about it in a couple of minutes. Mercy killing, on the other hand, is outlawed in all states and in most countries. That would be, oh, he doesn't look like he's doing very well. We'd better whack him while he sleeps. Not necessarily a good thing. Okay. Let's talk more about PVS. Front brain death. This controls the section of the brain that's dead, controls cognitive functioning. More basic heart and lung systems still function unaided since they're controlled by other parts of the brain. May be awake, but not conscious. No conscious interaction with the environment. Now, if you've read, the chapter and the text, Thoreau makes it seem as if this is universally accepted, and he oversimplifies it. Let me just say that this is not as simple or as final as Thoreau would have you believe. Now, ethicists the world over are debating this. Physicians are divided. Why would we change from the old system that we called time of death when the heart stopped to brain death? Well, brain death allows organs to be harvested earlier. But not everyone agrees with this concept. Again, it's not as clear-cut as Thoreau would have you believe. Now let's talk about allowing someone to die. This problem has become more crucial in the 20th century because of the availability of advanced life-saving and life-supporting technology and procedures. To die a natural death without interference from medical science. However, many are now aided by these new technologies that raise issues of quality of life and end-of-life care, prompting claims that we need a new way of allowing someone to die. We used to, refer to this as unplugging the machine, but there's so much more to it now. There are some arguments for and against allowing someone to die. Let's talk about arguments against. We'll begin with at that point. Abandonment of patients. The argument goes it is tantamount to abandoning a dying patient, though this need not be the case if we distinguish carefully between curing and healing and comforting, caring for. These two different aspects of medicine. And then the other argument, another one, not the other one, but another one, is cures may be found or miracle cures may occur. Possibilities of finding cures, it's always there. Does it happen often? No, but it is always a possibility. Now, arguments against allowing someone to die. We can never choose death over life. Medicine is designed to save lives, not to end them, and that is different from accepting death as inevitable and choosing it. Listen, whichever side of the fence you may be straddling right now, the fact is, once you're dead, there are no further options. Death is final. No chance of a cure, no chance of miracle recovery. Death is final, and so this needs to be considered. Allowing someone to die, according to this argument, interferes with God's divine plan. Once again, we're talking about the divine command theory. What constitutes interference? Because if you carry this to its logical conclusion, any medical care could constitute interference with God's plan. How far? How much is interference? How much isn't interference? And then allowing someone to die when the time comes or prolong that person's life. On the one hand, we're saying no. Allowing someone to die interferes with God's divine plan, but you could make the same argument about prolonging someone's life. God's divine plan may be that it's that person's time. Either way, it is a tough decision. Some more arguments for allowing someone to die. Individuals have rights over their own bodies. They have rights over their lives and their deaths. One can also argue, however, that their freedom is not unlimited. Patients have the right to refuse treatment, and we shouldn't overrule this right. Treatment often will not cure a particular patient, and sometimes it's worse than the disease. One case in point is chemotherapy. It's very important, and I am not saying you shouldn't opt for chemo. I am saying I have personal experience with watching chemo just destroy. My daughter had cancer, and she passed away 3 weeks after her 21st birthday. And the chemo was horrible. And finally, she just said, it's not saving my life. And it's making the time that I have left very uncomfortable. And so she opted to end the chemo treatment. And it is what it is. Some more arguments for allowing someone to die. Allowing someone to die will shorten suffering. However, it does shorten suffering, but it will also shorten that person's lifespan. Patients have the right to die with dignity. The phrase dying with dignity, however, can cover up abandonment, mercy death, and mercy killing. All right, we're at the point where we discuss ordinary and extraordinary means. This is an interesting concept because it's always changing. It's always in flux. What today is considered extraordinary, tomorrow will be considered ordinary. When I was in nursing school, for instance, they considered a CAT scan to be extraordinary because of the expense. Now it's routine to order those things. But let's talk about it. Extraordinary means to keep people alive, and these means involve a grave burden for oneself or for another. And they vary according to circumstances involving persons, places, times, and cultures. Such measures as radical surgery, radiation therapy, respirators, and heart machines probably fall into this category. Now, starting or discontinuing rare, unusual, risky, or expensive treatment, this is extraordinary. To what lengths should doctors go to save lives? In certain situations, doctors are justified in using extraordinary means to save a patient's life, though they are not morally obligated to use such means indefinitely. Now, ordinary means can also be difficult to define. But for terminally ill patients, they would include controlling pain and other symptoms as opposed to performing radical surgery or using respirators or heart machines. Appropriate or inappropriate care are sometimes more suitable terms than ordinary and extraordinary. Now, appropriate or inappropriate care is defined by the patient, by a specific patient. This is particular rather than general. So it's defined by the patient rather than is with ordinary and extraordinary reference to patients generally. Let's talk about the Patient Self-Determination Act. The act was passed by Congress in 1990. It stipulates the rights of patients, especially the right to formulate advance directives. Now, what is an advance directive, you may ask? Well, an advance directive is an instrument prepared in advance, hence the term advance directive, which allows patients to state the kind of care they wish to receive if they become too ill to formulate or communicate their wishes. Very important. Everyone should have an advance directive. And you've got to be aware that sometimes in some jurisdictions, they don't always stand up in court. And so you need to be very, very, very careful who you choose as your power of attorney. Who's going to make decisions for you if you're unable to? Because if you choose the wrong person, they may choose to disregard your advance directive. And it depends on the jurisdiction as to if that will be allowed. All right, hospice. The hospice approach to care for the dying. The hospice approach can solve most of the problems surrounding allowing someone to die. And often it can eliminate the necessity for mercy death and mercy killing. This is the approach that has changed the debate. And this is why people are saying we need new legislation, because hospice is incredible. The emphasis is placed on comforting and caring for patients rather than curing or healing them. You're going to control the pain. You're not worried about the overwhelming symptoms or the disease. It's not curable, so you're trying to make the patient as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. It has a team approach to provide support for patients and for families. And again, the emphasis is on pain and symptom control, not curing the disease. Whenever possible, the hospice approach utilizes outpatient or home care. It provides home-like, humanized inpatient care in comfortable surroundings. They will try to make the room as similar to the patient's room at home as possible. Your loved ones are provided usually places to stay so they can be close. Attempt to provide freedom from financial worry for patients and families. You are only able to be on hospice for a limited amount of time. And so if it looks like you're going to go over that amount of time, the providers need to be careful and maybe suspend a hospice treatment for a short period of time, because you're only given so much. But you don't need to worry about anything like that under the hospice approach. It provides bereavement counseling before, and during and after a patient's death. It allows patients to experience that dignity that used to be denied them. And it obviates most of the need, again, for mercy death and mercy killing. With that being said, let's talk about mercy death. We're not talking about allowing someone to die. We're talking about assisted suicide. Now, can patients in pain ever rationally choose death? This is rehashing the irrationality argument, if you remember from an earlier lecture. Though it went that a suicide can never be rational. And I think that we made some arguments against that were pretty cogent. But can patients in pain ever rationally choose death? The religious argument. Only God can pick or choose the time and the place of death. The domino argument. We always come back to these arguments. The justice argument. Domino argument says that if we allow mercy death in this circumstance, then it will become commonplace to allow it in other circumstances. And the justice argument, talks about those who are left behind after the mercy death. So some more arguments against mercy death. One, a cure could be found. You may be opting out too soon. And then a stronger argument is the hospice alternative has eliminated the need for mercy death, but some patients may not want hospice. And frankly, certain types of cancer are so painful and linger to the point where can you really keep a patient pain-free? You can do your very best, but at some point they become so medicated that the lights are on, but no one's home anyway. Some arguments for mercy death. Patients should have the freedom to decide about their own deaths, and the person who performs the act merely carries out the patient's wishes. We're talking about maximizing individual freedom and liberty. Strong argument. Here's one that the book brings up pretty interesting concept. We do the same thing for animals. If an animal is in pain, what do? We put the animal out of its misery. And this argument goes that we owe our fellow humans at least as much consideration and mercy. It asks the question, why do animals have more rights than humans? Well, let me take a stab at that real fast. They do because they're different. Animals and humans you're talking apples and oranges. Um, you know, they used to shoot a horse if it broke its leg. There was an episode of an old show I used to like called Scrubs, and in Scrubs, Dr. J.D. was wondering, well, what if this was more like an animal hospital? And so the doctors are walking around with shotguns, and oh, so Mr. Smith, you broke your leg, boom, boom. That's humorous, and this is certainly not a laughing matter, but there is a difference between animals and humans. We can put an animal out of its misery because I love cats and dogs. I do. I love my animals, but can I afford an expensive surgery for the dog or the cat? And the answer is no, I can't. Um, by the same token, if my wife is ill, it doesn't matter if I can afford it or not. I'm going to have to find a way because she's my wife. And at any rate, we need to consider the difference between the two. Some would say there is no difference. I mean, the PETA people say that we're nothing but animals, and animals have the exact same rights that humans have. I don't know where you are on that. I'm just saying, and I do see a difference between animals and humans. Now, there have been changes in attitudes towards mercy death. The Hemlock Society and Jack Kevorkian both continually advocated death with dignity. This act passed in 1994 in Oregon. Again, the AMA and the feds have opposed the Oregon law. Now, people who are terminal often want some control. They want some autonomy. Autonomy has become a buzzword. It's very important in our healthcare today. 30 years ago, if you wanted to get out of the hospital, you needed the doctor to discharge you. Now, the doctor cannot keep you in the hospital against your wishes. So some events reflecting this change in attitude, active advocacy for mercy death, court decisions, lack of autonomy of patients in medical care. Healthcare personnel have practiced forms of assisted suicide. Again, we go back to television. There's a show called Private Practice, and some of the episodes there have the doctor slipping additional morphine to a patient to help ease his pain. Does this happen? I cannot say if it happens. A text made this statement, but I'm sure that it can and probably does occur. Strong desire on a patient's part for greater autonomy and control over one's life and death. These are the things that have changed the attitude. Now, Thoreau has proposed some suggested safeguards for mercy death. The first, this would be a permissive rather than compulsory treatment. In other words, you can opt to have a mercy death, but it cannot be compulsory or mandatory. He adds perhaps a written request would be a safeguard. A waiting period, certainly. Counseling. More than one doctor. This would prevent a doctor with a proclivity for mercy death from just handing out, changing the situation based on their personal beliefs. So you'd need to have at least two doctors. Make these abuse of safeguards punishable by law. Give the law teeth and then enforce it. It should be painless. My daughter likes a show called Futurama. I remember seeing the very first episode, and fellow wakes up 1,000 years into the future and thinks he's going into a phone booth, but it's a suicide booth, and he has the option painless or extremely painful. And I had to laugh because who in their right mind would choose extremely painful? Thoreau makes the point that it should be painless. And then he adds a couple other possibilities, a judge approval. The problem with a judge approval is once you get the bench involved, there's the possibility of legislating from the bench. You want to avoid that if at all possible. It's a medical decision. Maybe a bioethics committee approval would be more germane. Now, some arguments for mercy killing. According to this argument, it does not violate the value of life principle because the person is not fully alive anymore. The longer people continue to merely exist, the greater the financial and emotional burdens on the family and on society. Remember, mercy killing, direct action, but not at the patient's request. The argument goes, this is mercy for the living dead. It relieves the family or the taxpayers of financial and emotional burdens. Plus, it takes into account the patient's desire to die. Well, my counter to this is that how do you know that the patient wanted to die? You don't know. They didn't leave an advance directive. And so I would stress again the importance of advance directives. If the patients could make their wishes known, perhaps they would want to die. And then legal safeguards can be clearly established to prevent abuses. Now, these are arguments for. I'm going to close with some arguments against. First of all, it is illegal. Make no mistake, it is illegal in all 50 states and in most countries. Regardless of the argument saying it is not a direct violation of the value of life principle, this argument says it is a violation of the value of life principle. Cures. Again, death is final. You cannot come out of a coma if you're dead. And then the domino argument. And with this new health care, no one knows exactly how it's going to go. But what has worried a large amount of people is, well, what happens? We make it legal to do this, and then because we want to save money, are we now going to deny care in certain cases? You're just too old. You've had a good life anyway. A lot of people are very worried about that. Think about all of these things. Read the chapter carefully. Take the practice exams, and you'll do just fine. As always, if you have questions, email me or give me a call. Have a great, great day.